All right. Well, it's 12 o'clock. And so more and more people are rolling in, and that's fine. They'll just jump in as we go. The way this is going to work, this is strictly just a webinar format. So, we won't be able to hear you, and you can't, you can't be seen. You don't have your video on. Don't worry about that. It's only my mug that everybody has to look at. But what we're going to do is I'm going to walk through a couple of different topics I wanted to share with everybody. And then we have plenty of time at the end. It's going to be a short little webinar here, just 30 minutes, but we're going to have time at the end for me to address specific questions as they come up. So please don't hesitate to type them as you think of them. Don't wait until the end to come up with them. Fire them at will, and then they'll get collected in that Q&A section, and then I'll go through them when we get to that part of the webinar. So thanks again, first of all, for all of you for carving out time to be part of this today. I just want to, by way of introduction, there's several people here on the list I've not met, several of you that I do know. But my name is James Lenhoff. I'm the president of Wealthquest. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm also a certified life coach. And it's an interesting combination there. I know it sounds weird to say those things together. The thing that I found is that life coaching has a kind of a hokey connotation where it's people that would say, hey, follow your dreams, do what you love. I don't know how you afford it. I don't know how you financially pull that off, but you should do it anyway. And the CFP, the financial planner, is really good at organizing and mapping out a very detailed plan for how to accomplish your dreams, but they're not necessarily skilled in helping you discover what those dreams are. And so what we found is there's a lot of times in the industry a gap between those two disciplines. And so the idea is try to bring those together, because the mathematical conversation about money is the easy part. It's the part that we tend to be more comfortable in. It's the part we want to stay in because it's not messy, it's predictable, it's easy to understand. Where the emotional part, the relational aspect of money and the way that our humanness interacts with money is what really gets hard and kind of complicated, and we tend to steer away from that. But I think that's where the work needs to be done. So today, we're going to spend some time in that messy, complicated part. We're going to talk about living with uncertainty in this time and also preparing for the reentry. How do we get back to whatever this new normal is as things open back up in a way that is more intentional and that we've thought about ahead of time, rather than just kind of letting it pull us along and becoming whatever it makes us become. And so we're going to dive in first with this idea of uncertainty. I think we are living in a season where we probably have more of a tangible, palpable feeling of uncertainty because of all the unanswered questions. There are a lot of things involved with this pandemic that are truly unknowable. And when things are unknowable, there's clearly a whole lot of uncertain thoughts that roll around in our head. But I can tell you, after walking through life with a whole lot of families for 20 years of being in this business, uncertainty is the only thing that's been constant. It's just that we have a really close to home, really unique experience with this particular brand of uncertainty. Most of the uncertainty that we felt in the past is familiar. It's what's the market going to do? How's the government going to resolve this problem? The fiscal cliff, the government shutdowns. We've had so many of these moments of uncertainty, but they're in a realm where we have had similar uncertainties before, and so we don't get quite as bent out of shape around them. This is an experience that none of us have lived through. And so that is kind of taking it to a different league. And I think that's why it's been so much more complicated to bring ourselves back down out of that kind of framework of uncertainty. So what I want to talk about as a starting point, and some of this is going to feel like a bit of a review real quick, we're going to talk about this model that is based in cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's really rooted in this idea of circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. Circumstances are always neutral. They're the facts that everyone agrees on. They are the just unopinionated, no judgment truths that we deal with. Those circumstances in and of themselves don't cause anything. They don't make us feel sad or scared or excited. They by themselves are neutral. we have a thought about that circumstance that adds a judgment. This is good. This is bad. That thought that we have, this is going to get really bad or it's going to get worse. That's all happening in our own brain, and that creates the feeling of anxiety or joy or delight or any other feeling that we're feeling is all coming from thoughts we're having. That feeling that we feel is what drives our actions or inactions, and that actually then leads to the results that we achieve. The reason why it's so important to understand that model in this environment right now is because the thoughts that we're having that lead this uncertainty are all rooted in statements that start with, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be okay. I don't know if I'm going to run out of money. I don't know if I'm going to get sick. All of those I don't know statements are our experience of uncertainty. And what happens is we don't like the feeling of anxiety. It's uncomfortable. We want to medicate it. We want to make it go away. And we tend to want to get to a place where we can get rid of the I don't know statements and replace it with I know statements, which is why we're so addicted to the news cycle. 24-hour-a-day news is thriving on our desperate need to get rid of the I don't know. It's our attempt to get to a place of I know. If we just absorb enough information about the pandemic, if we just know enough about the market and what's happening, if we just sit and stew in it long enough, maybe we'll finally know enough that that uncertainty will go away. And we've created a monster because that system is all designed to have a bunch of people get on TV and tell us that they know, that they have confidence, that they know the answer to the question. And depending on who we're listening to, we get into an echo chamber. That echo chamber is really part of the problem. We don't want to feel I don't know, and so we listen to someone who we think does know, and we get stuck in this repeated cycle where Facebook and Google News and whatever other outlet you're receiving your information from is feeding you information that confirms our existing biases. All the things we already think are true, we see nothing but news that tells us that's right, that that is true. And we start to feel like we know. And the thing that's so fascinating about this season is how incredibly divided the world is on knowing. This camp says, I know that we don't need face masks and this is all stupid. And this camp says, we're all going to die. Face masks are absolutely required. Everything's terrible. And the truth is, both of those camps are really coming from a place of, I don't know. We've never lived this before. We've never experienced it. Anyone who says that this thing that we've never experienced before, I know exactly what we need to do and I know exactly how it works, that is not intellectually honest. That's just trying to make us feel better. And so one of the challenges that we have in this uncertain time is we become more desperate for certainty and we pull ourselves further apart from everyone else. What I want to help us do is get to a place where we're more comfortable and more willing to feel the uncertainty and sit in it and let it happen. Because the truth is, all of this has always been uncertain. This idea that somehow back then in the good old days, things were certain. Well, the good old days are only certain in a rearview mirror. We feel really confident looking backwards because we know the answers to a lot of the questions we were asking back then. And this is a really challenging time because we probably were as certain as we've been in recent history just a few months ago. For most of us, this was the height of our wealth. We had accumulated the most, the market had gone up the most, we were achieving new levels of confidence and certainty because the numbers were getting bigger. And then in the course of a week, it all started to fall apart and all that uncertainty came rushing back. I'm not convinced that that's going away. I think that we're still going to be in a sea of uncertainty for probably the rest of our lives, unfortunately. But particularly with this flavor of uncertainty, we still got a lot of questions we don't have answers to yet. And so one of the things I want us to do when we think about how to handle uncertainty is first spend some time reflecting back on past uncertainties that now we have answers to. How many times in recent history can you think of all of the things that were supposed to be the end of the world, that were supposed to have caused the final collapse, the next Great Depression, the next example of devastation, whatever it is? Those were all things that we convinced ourselves were going to turn into something bad. And we now know the answer of what they really turned into. It helps me as I reflect back on all of the times that the market was supposed to implode and all of the examples of when everything was going to fail and it didn't. It helps me to realize how terrible we are at predicting the future. We are really bad at it, notoriously bad at it, and yet we keep thinking we can do it. And so reflect back and remember all those examples just as a way to remind yourself, we've done this before. Maybe not this exact scenario, but we've lived this kind of problem many different ways. The second thought is get to a place where we're comfortable with I don't know. Because I don't know is true. I don't know is authentic. It's also the most intellectually honest thing we can say right now. Anyone who is bringing certainty into an unknowable circumstance is really just setting us up for failure and certainly more division. And so I want to encourage us to get to a place where we actually acknowledge or recognize, I guess I should say, I don't know as a strong statement. It actually can create more fascinating conversations between us. When someone says, I don't know, they're open to someone else saying, yeah, I don't know either. Maybe what about this or what about that? When you say, I know this is the right answer, you shut down or you create some combative interaction with the other side, right? That also knows. And we're equally confident in things we should have no confidence in, which is the ultimate irony. And so bringing back this idea of I don't know and being more comfortable with it is really, really important. We need to allow that uncertainty to just be there. Be comfortable in it. Let it do what it does. One of the things that I have coached people on, which is really fun, is this idea of anxiety. Explain it to someone as if they don't know what it is. If I were to explain anxiety to a Martian, for example, who's never felt anxiety before, and they come down and they say, you keep telling me that this anxiety thing is really terrifying. What is it? And I would say, well, you know, my palms get sweaty, my heart beats a little faster, I breathe a little shallower. It just feels, you know, tense. My muscles tense up. And they would say, and then what happens? Do you die? Well, no, it goes away eventually. I'm like, why are you so afraid of that? Why are you so desperate to resist it or to replace it or to make it go away? What if we just let it happen for a little while and then it's over and we can get back to living a life that's more purposeful rather than sitting in front of the news and trying to absorb all the information to make the I don't know go away. So here's a couple of things I think we can do more intentionally. Grab hold of what we can be certain of. And what I mean by that is twofold. First, when it comes to money, what we need to do in order to get to more confidence here is grab hold of the things we are confident of. If we have a very clear-headed plan that says spend this much money, save this much money, pay this much down on your debt, make sure you are really aware of how you are doing against those controlled options, those things that you can check the boxes of. Because one of the problems we find a lot of times with clients is when they have more money than they need, they don't track anything very well because they haven't needed to. But then when these cycles of uncertainty come around, they can't look with confidence at what they planned on doing and say, I'm doing what I planned. If you don't know what you're spending, then we don't know for sure if you're spending what we planned on. And that adds to the uncertainty rather than relieving it. And so this is a time to start to really buckle down on paying attention to what's happening, not in a way that's tightening the belt and denying yourself, but just in a way that makes sure you know that you're doing what you said you would do, because that brings back certainty. That's something you know. It starts to replace the I don't knows. The other thing is the family vision, which we're going to talk more about in the next section as well. But this is something that I've been really passionate about. One of the problems that I see when families don't have a clear purpose of why they exist and why they are together, what they're really trying to accomplish as a unit, is they don't have an idea of what they will show up to be regardless of the circumstances. One of the beautiful things about having these we will statements, which is part of the process for our family vision work, is if we have we will statements, and for example, in our family, a couple of ours are we will lift the burdens of others and we will live in deep relationship. Well, when a new version of normal comes along, I know that at a minimum, we are going to lift the burdens of others and we are going to live in deep relationship. I have something I can grab hold of where I can say, I don't know what's going to happen out here, but I know how I'm going to show up in the midst of it either way. That family vision grounds us in something that's confident and solid, that we know we can stay connected to, even in the midst of things we can't answer. We know we're at least going to show up in the way we intended to show up. It may change as we are forced to stay home, for example. The way we help others is different, but it's still valuable for us to have that thing to hold on to in the midst of the crazy uncertainty. Let's talk about, the other thing I wanted to touch on, and I skipped, sorry, was this idea of money. Don't confuse, when it comes to money, the idea of something that's scary with something that's actually dangerous. We tend to think of those as one and the same, but they're not. In the financial market, scary comes with the territory. The market goes up and goes down. It's part of the deal. But that is not by itself dangerous. If the market has volatility, when the volatility is to our favor, meaning the market goes up at a crazy fast pace, we love it. We think it's great. It somehow feels safe. When the market goes down at a fast pace, we think it's really dangerous. It's actually just scary. Dangerous is when you actually do something that tries to protect yourself and you end up leading to your own financial failure. Let's say, for example, the market's down, everything feels scary. So we say, hey, I'm going to take it out of the market. I'm going to go get this thing that guarantees me 1% return. And that 1% guaranteed return feels safe because it's not scary, but it's actually dangerous. If I need to make 6% return over the life of my portfolio in order to make my goals work, if I have a 95% chance of achieving that over here with some scary volatility, that's actually not dangerous. If I have a 0% chance of achieving it over here with a guaranteed 1% return, that's actually dangerous. It will create my failure, even though I feel safe all along the way. This is a really important dynamic to understand because we tend to think of those as the same. They are very, very different. Things can be scary, but still be the right thing to be in. All right, let's talk about this idea of reentry real quick, and then we're going to open it up to questions. This is all about, for me, the treadmill analogy. We just put out a really funny video yesterday, which I really enjoyed making, where we compared this reentry to the idea of jumping on a moving treadmill. That we all came to a dead stop and the treadmill kept spinning, and now we're going to try to jump back into normal from that dead stop. And there are fail videos all over the internet of people who try to jump back onto a moving treadmill and get launched across the room. If we try to get back to normal, if we are tempted to just try to get our schedule back to the way it was and force normal back into our life the way we used to experience it, we have the risk of jumping on that moving treadmill and getting launched. This is the only opportunity we have, maybe in our lifetime, to change the speed of the treadmill before we jump back on, to be intentional about how we approach the new normal. This is the only opportunity because everyone's had the same experience. We all lived through a version of this pandemic. It's not been exactly the same for everybody. In some cases, it's been devastating. In other cases, it's been restful, right? But at the end of the day, we all have an awareness of this thing that we all just lived through. And so if we decide to change, this is the only time when everyone else will understand why we're making that change. When you go off to a retreat, or you go have some kind of mountaintop experience, when you come back and no one else had that experience, it's really hard to make lasting change because they're going to pull you back to your old normal. This is our chance to decide ahead of time what our life will look like. What are the decisions we want to make? And so the things I want to encourage us to do are to pay attention to what we dropped. What was taken away from us? What are the things that were on your calendar that aren't anymore? Before you just pick them up because they feel normal, decide if you really wanted them in the first place. A lot of times we just kind of get sucked into things and it just kind of takes us along. We may have been doing a lot of things we weren't actually all that excited about. I know I can say that for me. I want to be intentional about deciding now which of those things I'm going to let go of and let them lay down, and which ones I'm going to pick back up. Because if I pick them all back up, I'm running at a pace that I really can't sustain. I also want to encourage us to think about our financial priorities. What did we learn in this season that we discovered is more important to us? How we spend our money. For our family, for example, we have been really shut down in being able to go and spend money on a lot of entertainment. Can't go to movies, can't do a lot of things like that. And so it's really reoriented us in terms of how we want to engage in each other's relationship. How do we spend money together as a family? It's gotten way simpler, which I think is healthy. And we're going to keep some of that. We want to make the decision now to maintain some of that discipline and some of the ways we've been operating in the pandemic, rather than just tripping back into doing what we used to do. And this is also a critical piece for the family vision. If we decide now, when we are at this level state where everybody's slowed down and we're at that rest, we can decide how we want to show up and what those priorities are. We have a reference point to make decisions from going forward. When an opportunity comes along, we can see if it fits into our vision rather than just saying yes to everything as it comes our way. It becomes a really powerful central hub for the whole family to reference those decisions and make those along the way. And so that would be, again, an encouragement. Go check out the Family Vision course that we just put out, just as a way to start the process with your family. Start having different conversations around how we're going to show up before everything opens back up and we're all running again at the pace we used to run. All right, so those were just some of the thoughts I wanted to share really quickly. Let's open it up to just some questions that you guys have. It looks like we got a couple here. Let me see what we got. Great question. This is a question about traveling. How do we get back to traveling? One of the things that I think is most complicated when it comes to travel right now is getting to a place where we have comfort. I would expect that we will probably not see a return to real normal travel levels until we have a vaccine. I think cruise ships are going to be, shut in for quite some time. I think international travel, not knowing what the healthcare situation is across the sea that you're going to, those are all really obvious limitations to getting back to the normal state of affairs when it comes to travel. So what I've heard a lot of clients doing is they're shifting. They're doing more road trips. I actually had a client recently that just bought an Airstream trailer because they said, we still want to go places, but now we're going to do it hauling the trailer around and go do these big road trips rather than flying. So I think it's, for us, if a priority is still travel, we just need to reorient how are we going to accomplish that priority, because I do think that air travel, for the most part, is still going to be shut down at a level where it's going to be hard to get flights and you're still going to have a lot of fear getting on that plane. What other questions come to mind? We have one here about wild fluctuations in the market and our retirement funds. How do we navigate that? One of the things that I think is most complicated for retirees is they tend to look at the number. That number is what they pay attention to. And when that number fluctuates, to the downside in particular, they immediately jump to thoughts around, I'm going to fail, I'm going to run out of money, this is all going to turn into a disaster. And that's that ceiling and the floor problem that we talk about in the book, that we get used to a number, that comfortable feeling of I'm standing on $2 million and I have confidence because I have $2 million. And if that 2 million becomes 1,850,000, oh no, I'm moving backwards, I'm in trouble. But there was a point in your life where $2 million was pie in the sky, never going to happen, way out there in the future. And we've got to recognize the fact that that floor that we're standing on used to be a ceiling. And we had confidence in the past before we had $2 million. We had, you know, a sense of security, and it wasn't because of the 2 million, because we had that when we didn't have 2 million. It's all still something that's happening inside our own brains. And so when it comes to fluctuations in the retirement accounts, one of the most critical things to do is disconnect your thoughts around your retirement from the balance in your portfolio. Spend what you planned on spending. The plan already accounts for the fact that the market doesn't go in a straight line, that there's all kinds of movements up and down and everything in between. We're already counting on that. As long as you're doing what's in your control and spending what we planned on, you can have a lot of confidence that you're going to be just fine. Question around markets. Yeah, the markets appear to be running ahead of themselves. Thoughts? Yeah, I have lots of thoughts about that. The market is absolutely bouncing way faster than we thought. And one of the challenges that I see is that we are getting a lot of really bad data, and the market is running on that bad data. Worst ever, jobless claims. No problem. Market rallies on that data. This is a forward-looking indicator. The question I'm having a hard time figuring out is how far forward is it looking? And I'm not sure about that right now. This is my I don't know, right? We got to get comfortable with that. I don't know if we're looking 6 months out or 12 months out. I do feel like this move has been rather swift. It's been supported dramatically by the Fed and by the stimulus. We have something around 6 trillion, a little more than that, $6 trillion in combined money that's just been pushed into the system. That is a juggernaut. That's a big weight that got tipping, it's tipping the scales in the favor of the market. And I wouldn't underestimate that. But at the same time, I don't see how we get back to the earnings that we were at quickly if restaurants are opening with 35% capacity and retail stores are opening with only allowing certain numbers of people in at the same time. Those are very limiting factors to earnings. My expectation is that we're probably, at best, stuck in a range here for a while we figure the rest of this out. But if we continue to get more optimism on a vaccine and some of these other things that could be game changers, we might see this thing be a reasonable reflection of valuation. But right now, I agree with you. It does feel like it's a little further ahead than it deserves to be. But that's part of the ride, unfortunately, when you're in the market. It'll confuse the snot out of you. I have said the market has been overvalued so many times in my career and then found that it doubled from there. You just can't predict it. Let's see. Question about family vision. This is a question I actually had from a client the other day. How do you have a family vision if your kids are grown? How do you get the family together? The way I would recommend that is that we actually think of your family, you and your spouse, as a unit. Your kids are grown and they're going to create their own family vision, and that's okay. Create a vision for you and your spouse as a way to say, this is who we are, this is how we're going to show up, and then let your kids in on what you've decided so that they can be part of it. One of the most beautiful things for families when they do this is you may find that there's overlap. If your we will statement includes things like we will lift the burdens of others, or we will do adventure together. That's one that I've seen. We will do adventure together. Well, if I have a kid who's grown, who has kids, and one of theirs is adventure, we will do adventure together. We could go and do adventures as a larger community together, right? Where there's overlap, you get to engage in both living out your vision together. But don't have your grown kids at this point determine your vision for now. And the family vision, by the way, is not a static, never changing thing. It's something that's really you should be reviewing on a relatively frequent basis because things change, priorities change. And so if you are the matriarch and patriarch of a family that has grown on their own, one of the most beautiful things I've seen is everybody in there gets their own family vision, and then you compare and you can see how you can help each other live that out. Let's see. Yeah, that's a great thought, Keith. Reaching out to others can be another habit to help embrace uncertainty. How would you suggest we best do this without becoming a burden to them? This is hard in this season. I think one of the things that I have tried to do is engage via video chat whenever you can, text messages, just quick check-ins, and have the check-ins be related to just sharing in their concern. How are you doing? What are you reading about today? What are you feeling? To give them a place to vent some of what they're holding in. A lot of times we don't want to share our uncertainty with others. We just kind of sit on it, and it just kind of eats away at us over time. And so a great way to just do some quick check-ins is via text message, just to ask questions. How you doing? What are you thinking about today? How are you holding up? Those kinds of questions, just to get the prompt to respond and open up. We need relationship in order to create a you know a comfort in the midst of this uncertainty. Let's see. How is Okay, this is a good one. How is Wealthquest planning to re-engage back in your office? Right now, we are planning on staying remote through June. That's been decided, but we are thinking about how we're going to re-engage back in in-person meetings. One of the things that's really challenging is we have clients that range in age from their 20s to their 90s and everything in between, and we're really intent to make sure that we aren't the reason why one of our older clients gets sick. And so it's really hard. We want to see everybody in person, but until we can get to a place where we have some level of confidence of how to really do that well, we're still doing video chat for the time being. But my guess is sometime in late June, early July, we'll be back to doing in-person meetings again. Let's see. Great. Well, we said this would be a half hour. We're pretty much right at the half hour. Please know if there are any questions you want to ask me directly or follow up with the team, you're welcome to do that. You can email me directly at jlenhoff@wqcorp.com. And I'd be happy to get back to you on any of the questions that you have. So thanks again for carving out some time and being a part of this with us today. This is something I think we're going to try to do more often on different topics, just to connect with everybody in the midst of all this crazy time. So stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.